CTV and sports. Can't talk about sports without CTV action. So, excited to introduce myself. I'm Steven, Director of Sales at Volta. I kind of already explained our platform, so we'll get into a little background with Sean. Sean, can you give some background on your career, history, everything?
Good morning. So Sean Boyle, I lead brand strategy and content strategy along with media teams over at Max as part of Warner Brothers Discovery, formerly HBO Max. We'll get into that. Sure.
Yeah.
Been there for about we're approaching 3.5 years. I was a 12-year agency guy. I got really lucky, right time, right place, working on at the agency that launched HBO Max during COVID. I did some great work on the performance side. I was asked to come in and kind of restructure how we were thinking about the brand, as well as how we bring our content to market.
Awesome. Family, where are you from? Give us a little personal background.
So I'm from California, but I am 20 plus years here in Scottsdale. My wife is here. I have a 7-year-old daughter and love being out here. So thank you for making the trek if you're out of state to the Final Four. We're excited to have you.
Awesome. We'll dig right into it. So sports, just so near and dear to so many people's hearts. It's a place that brands invest so much time and effort searching for the right team, individual, event, story to associate their name with. And it's really a place that HBO knew they had to dig their roots in early on. So kind of, Sean, can you kind of give us a background of HBO's history in sports, and then kind of the evolution of the content offering, and fast forwarding to now?
Yeah, I mean, so HBO isn't really synonymous with sports. Like you wouldn't think about that if you thought about the brand over the past couple decades. But if you go back to the early 70s, 1972, when the first HBO paid telecast actually took place, our first airing was an NHL game, the New York Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks. So we really started the brand in sports, and from there, 1975, Thrilla and Manila. If you remember Ali and Frazier, probably one of the biggest boxing matches of all time, or at least greatest. And really, we kind of cemented the brand. We were the home of great boxing matches. As we evolved. And of course, we had great original programming, but it kind of sat side by side with sports. And as we kind of, got further in, content became a lot more of our offering. We were known for appointment viewing. Sunday nights, HBO owned. We still own today, arguably. I am biased. But, our sports offering went from live sports viewing to actually content. We have some of, I think, the greatest documentaries, whether it's real-time sports or the Hard Knocks series. Our training camp is arguably one of our best performing series in sports. We now do in season. We are launching another one, which is out of season with the New York Giants this year. That's kind of confidential, like breaking, so only for this room. But we transitioned to prestige drama, and that's really what the HBO brand became known for. But now as the evolution of the streaming wars and consumer viewership has shifted, we've now actually, with the launch of Max, moved back into live sports co-viewing currently, with our Turner networks, NBA, NHL, MLB. We air that within platform, and then we're also moving into some exclusive rights. So we just launched an exclusive deal with the Bellator MMA series, and we have a bunch of other stuff on the roadmap for this year and next, so we're really excited about that.
Yeah. Brian Gumble always brings me back.
Brian Gumble is great, and unfortunately that is going away, but I'm sure we're going to find another great talent and series to replace it with.
Amazing. And so how do you guys think about with the right mix of sports, live sports, shows on Max, just to ensure that you're engaging and most importantly retaining those customers, because the wars are real.
Yeah, well, so the streaming wars is an interesting phenomenon. I think we're at a point where we say the streaming wars are over. I think we definitely understand now that Netflix has reached scale. They're kind of first to market in terms of the streaming service. So we definitely know where we sit kind of in the pecking order, and we're happy about that. We think we have one of the deepest catalogs when it comes to original content. Again, we still own Sunday night when it comes to appointment viewing and our original programming. But beyond just having people come in for Sunday night, we really wanted to broaden the offering, and I think that leads to something you and I have talked about, which is why the Max rebrand. We get that asked, or that's asked, pretty often. HBO was again known for prestige content. Whether it is rated R or adult-oriented content. But as the streaming wars really kind of came to the end, we needed to really broaden out our offering. And so the thesis of a merger that you might have heard of that we went through a little over 2 years now was bringing in content where people would come into the product, whether it's a Tuesday, it's you're sipping on your morning coffee and you want to watch our news programming. You want to have something in the background as you're cooking dinner, or you want to be sitting on the couch, at 9 o'clock Eastern on Sunday, and you're watching the new series of House of the Dragon, which is dropping in June. And so, we really wanted to make it a product for everyone. And again, not that the HBO brand was bad, but it definitely had that connotation. And so, by removing that, it's still privileged in our product. You log into the UI, it's HBO's right at the top. All our original content is HBO original content or Max original content. So we still elevate it. But we offer a little bit more expansive if you want family-friendly content. If again, HBO or House of the Dragon really isn't your type of show, you have something more to offer.
Yeah, so I guess, given, we'll kind of get into, how Mac kind of evangelized itself. Given that sports is so broad, how does Max identify and selects the right sports partnerships to align, align brand values, target audience, et cetera?
Yeah, I think, I'm definitely spoiled in my position, and that WBD obviously has some of the best sports rights, here actually in North America and globally when you look at EMEA and overseas, we have the Olympics. But here in the U.S., we have NBA, we have the NHL, we have MLB, we have the NBA playoffs, MLB playoffs. We have the national men and women's soccer matches that we are. Like I said, now we have Bellator, cycling, and again some other sports leagues that will be coming on as part of our distribution rights. And so for Max, we really get to leverage that deeper relationship. So through our owned and operated media, we're able to tie in our brand and speak to a much broader set of consumers that may not be Max subscribers. We call them the winnable nevers. So they've never subscribed to Max or they've never subscribed to D+. But that creates an interesting challenge in that we're kind of advertising to our own audience through our networks. And we need to sell the Max proposition of like, why should they come to Max and pay a fee on top of or potentially cancel their linear telecast, which is a controversial piece that we constantly debate the trade-offs. But the reality is again, if we could bring you over for sports and convert you for what you're already watching on our networks, we're giving you so much more in terms of the content. Going back to, you're getting the prestige drama, you're getting comedies like Hacks. If you are a CNN news viewer, you have a live feed and original content that's coming. You have fringe content that we're developing. And really, again, through the merger, we've expanded our offering not only through the sports and the HBO, but now we have ID and true crime, Discovery Networks, food, the Magnolia network, which is really lean back. We typically call it palate cleansing content. So after you watch House of the Dragon, the Red Wedding, you're like, okay, I need to go to bed. Let me watch something a little bit easier. So we're constantly looking at how can we integrate the Max brand with the sports offering. We integrate in the telecast with Charles and Shaq. We run our IPMs. We are able to get promo inventory through our counterparts on ad sales. And work collaboratively to really bring our franchises and our content to life on our own and operating networks. And then outside of it, we're always looking for opportunities of how can we tie in, where can we find incremental audience reach, and creating those partnerships. Again, we haven't gone as deep into sports partnerships as of yet. We just launched relaunched the brand last year, so we're kind of getting our footing, building a base, and we'll start to look into those opportunities hopefully here in the short term.
So I guess continuing on that, what would be like a campaign that you guys have ran recently?
We're here in Phoenix for the Final Four and the championship. I'd be remiss to not advertise that we have it exclusively on Max. So the NCAA and men's tournament specifically is a partnership between Warner Bros. Discovery, our Turner Networks, and CBS. So much of the early rounds, we share the games between CBS and ourselves. Every game that aired on, again, the Turner Networks, whether it's TBS or TNT, concurrently viewed on Max. But now that we've moved into the Final Four and then the championship on Monday, that will be exclusive to the T-Nets as well as Max. So, of course, with the new brand, we want to get that out there. It's a very challenging time because if you're an NCAA tournament lover, specifically, have a team that's in the tournament. The idea of like you're watching very early on, but if your team drops out, you might drop out. We're also up against viewing habits. If you are again a tournament fan, you probably already know where you're going to watch. The games, specifically if they're on our networks, or you go to your your local bar, your buddy's house, what have you. And so our value proposition that we went in the market with is like, how can we sell a wide max message that you can come and see these games during their time, so if they were on our networks, and then you could stay for, like I said, any of our new episodes or series that we just launched. So we went into market with an advertising campaign about 3 weeks ago, excuse me. Really planned that out. We employed Charles Barkley and Shaq in a really playful 30, and then we had cut downs that we could circulate across social and other partners. Just really showing the fun of the tournament. I would say there are a ton of restrictions that we had to lean into in terms of nil and players that are in the spots. So it was very broad in the sense that we were using our owned and operated talent through those two to really kind of sell the funness of the big dance and why you should end up coming to Max Action View.
Yeah, and I guess since you're kind of bringing back the sports theme on the platform, how do you measure in the now and thinking for the future?
Yeah, so I live in two worlds. I live in the brand world, which is awareness and favorability and habituality and trying to drive intent, and that's obviously measured over a longer period of time. And then for more like recency, obviously when we have new IP coming to the platform, it's really about trying to get that person the last mile to actually convert. And I work with our counterparts in growth to ensure that. So through and through, at the first, like we are an acquisition organization. We need to get you to subscribe, and beyond that, like once we are able to actually build that relationship with you and get you to the platform, it's really about engagement, viewership, and retention. And one thing we focus a lot on is really the diversity of viewing that you have. So this isn't just sports specific, but if you come in for a show, you may have a high affinity because you are going to keep using House of the Dragon as an example. You've watched Game of Thrones in the past, and now you want to come in, but how do we get you to stick around? And it really goes back to that idea, like we don't want you to just be a Sunday night appointment viewer. We really want you to experience everything else that we have to offer. And so we focus a lot on those engagement metrics and how do we use our internal tools, whether it's CRM, merchandising, post messaging, email, to actually show you what we have coming up and move you from, if you come in for March Madness, which we hope you will. Hopefully, everyone here in the room tomorrow will subscribe and watch. I expect to see a little uptick in Phoenix tomorrow. But how do we move you from watching those games on Saturday or Monday to our new episodes of Sympathizer, which premieres next weekend, which is a great new series with Johnny Depp and follows some of the historical events of the Korean War. So. Beyond that, like I said, the retention benefit that we can get when we move you from sports to content, or content to movies, or movies to sports, makes you much more stickier. You're more happy with your product experience because, again, you're exploring more that what we have to offer, and you're not just coming in and subscribing for one piece of content or one game.
It's a lot on your plate.
It's a lot. Listen, it is a lot. I have a great team though, so yeah. I definitely would not be doing it myself.
Awesome. Okay, so there's proliferation of devices. It's just they're everywhere, right? So how does Max adapt its sports marketing strategies across the different devices to reach and engage all the audiences?
Yeah, so I think that's the past 10 years. When the great unbundling happened with linear networks, is that the fragmentation of consumers' viewership was great. Luckily, I think we're moving back into a phase of we're calling the great rebundling. And you're seeing that happen with our merger, where we brought together two legacy companies in Discovery and Warner Media, and brought together our linear telecasts. You have the combination of our streaming services. You're seeing it with Disney and the Hulu Disney bundling. But still, consumers' eyes are in many different places. Not to use the generic marketing term, but we do live in the attention economy. And so how, as a brand, do you get the attention of a consumer that maybe looked at you 10 years ago, going back to the HBO example, said, yeah, you know what, HBO is not for me, but maybe I'll give Max a try. So it is definitely multi-platform. We, in terms of our media mix, and we have a great data science team, and we have a pretty robust data science model that helps us kind of triangulate where consumers are and how they are behaving, and what might resonate with them. So that kind of gives us a starting point. But at the end of the day, like, you have to get the message in front of them, and you have to be where they're at, with the right message in the right time, again, to use some of the generic lingo. And it's tough. Like, it's the streaming landscape is still, again, pretty fragmented, and so trying to convince them we have to leverage our product. And again, that's sports, that's content, that's our movies, and we're continually attaching more products to the streaming service to try to really get to that total value proposition that consumers really resonate with.
That's awesome. So looking ahead, what emerging trends are you seeing foresee shaping the future of sports marketing? And how's Max preparing to capitalize on it?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked what was said earlier, and again, I think it was Molly who said, she's a data person. I'm absolutely a data person, so I'm constantly looking at the landscape as it pertains to media, and we're getting ready for our upfronts, that will take place, when we've got to get everything locked in for Q4. So our agency just gave us a pretty big landscape overview, and an interesting trends happening in the media landscape, and I'll correlate this back to sports, I promise.
Yeah.
Is, we all know linear viewership and subscriptions are declining. Digital connected TV is increasing because consumers are obviously canceling their cable bundle and they're moving to streaming services, or they're going through Amazon or Roku or their connected TV. And so the viewership is share shifting. But what's interesting is when you actually look at the linear viewership, in terms of total viewership, it's actually pretty stagnant over the past couple of years, and largely what that is driven by is sports. And so not only is it like more people are watching sports like NFL, NBA, etc., but you're actually starting to see the introduction and acquisition of other sports leagues. So go back to we were talking about women's sports earlier, NWLS, like huge sports right deal just recently. The professional lacrosse league, PLL, through Disney. And so you're seeing some of these fringe sports leagues that have never been or had distribution rights because, again, they weren't deemed big enough. But I think consumers, palates are broadening, and so therefore they're opening themselves up to more different sports leagues. So I think the get to your question is like what I see as the future is more advertisers getting more specific, especially going back to the measurement, like as you think about audience segmentation and understanding your audience, at their core, right? And the million attributes that make up who they are and where they're watching, you do start to see that they are watching these other sports. They're not just in the Sunday night NFL game. They're not just in the Super Bowl. I mean, the majority of them are. And so as you think about your media mix and how you're buying and being more efficient, you're going to actually start to put your money in these other sports leagues, which is great, again, for the sports leagues, both men and women, because they're being elevated. And it's good for marketers because I'm getting an incremental reach to the audience.
Awesome. So I think we got one more question for our man Sean here. So what advice would you give other brands seeking to kind of integrate sports into their overall marketing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to a lot of my focus over 3 years. Like I said, transparently, like when I came into Warner Brothers and Max specifically, I wasn't a sports guy. I wasn't really focused on sports. I was focused on the content. So as our sports offering is broadened, it has necessitated, going back to what I just said, is understanding our consumers, our winnable nevers. What is their makeup? Where are they at? And also just to say, like HBO used to be what we called like the coastal elites. A majority of our subscribers came from the West Coast or came from the East Coast. Really not Middle America or the flyover states. And so, looking at those demographics or the geo, and the people that live there and what they find interesting, and again, really getting down to a clear definition of who they are, is I think important for any brand. That's kind of table stakes for any media or marketing professional. But then extrapolating that knowledge into messaging. And they said, I think sometimes our problems are as complex, if not more complex in terms of getting consumers to really hand over their credit card for yet another streaming service. Especially amplified by if they've already said no to us over the course because they associated with just HBO. We're really trying to change behavior, and to do that, you really need to know who you're talking to.
Great stuff by Sean. Any questions from the crowd? I feel like we're almost at lunchtime, and we gotta. No, we're not. We gotta pick the energy up.
Jason said no food for you.
No food.
Sorry, I don't want to get in between lunch, but quick question from a sports perspective. We're seeing media companies change, reshape the college football landscape with conferences, the playoffs. I don't think that's done yet, but their attentions are starting to turn to college basketball. So where do you see that the future for college basketball in the NCAA tournament?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have the credentials to talk about it. I guess a personal story is I was a swimmer in college. I went to ASU, so sadly, we've never been really into the tournament that much. When I was there, it was the Herb Sendek era, and so we had a really great team. But now the Pac-12, is pretty much non-existent, and everyone has kind of rallied into these divisions where the commercial upside I think is inherent. I'm of the mind personally that anytime you can grow the sport and you can give the teams and the leagues or the conferences a platform to widen or expand their audiences, the better. I think you have to be cautious when you do that you're not leaving other teams or conferences behind. All tides lift all boats, or one tide lifts all boats, whatever it is. And so I think there's a fine balance as that happens. Again, with I'll switch. You said men's NCAA. I'm going to switch to women's NCAA as a perfect example. Is there's just so much more, or there's so much interest in these sports leagues going down to college, and I think you even said it, even some of the high school athletes. There's going to be a lot of attention. I think we as marketers and brands are a part of that story in terms of how can we make it better. What the future looks like in 10 years, I think it's going to be bigger than it is today in all aspects.
What? Oh.
Go. Sorry.
Yeah. So one question, probably from a consumer standpoint. So I know you said the streaming wars are kind of close to being over, but I feel like there's a lot of these tertiary kind of bundling activations that exist. So for example, if you have an Amex card, you can get Walmart Plus. If you get Walmart Plus, you get Paramount Plus. So a lot of times I sign up that way personally. And I was just curious how important that is and where do you see that kind of going in the future?
Yeah, well, I'd say, kind of put it back to you, it's kind of confusing, isn't it? All these different things. And listen, when the fragmentation happened, brands had to necessitate some of these activations just to survive. That largely was, in my point of view, the streaming war. It's you had 20 different streaming services fighting for the same you. And so they were trying to figure out how can they get it from you, and largely that's still happening. That goes back to the multi-platform, the messaging, selling the total value proposition, and really trying to build an authentic relationship to get you into the product. And once you're in the product, make sure you're continually happy with the content diversity. It's a big problem. As the streaming wars start to become less of a hurdle, you're seeing these companies bundle, you're seeing them go out of business. You're seeing them merge. That's going to continue to happen over the next decade. I think the confusion on the consumer side starts to go away because we don't have to be as competitive and doing all these little micro. We can really focus on the big question and the big problem, which is why Max for you, Anthony? What can we give you that gets you in and that gets you this in?
I have a question, sort of a fun question, more of what's your opinion on this, but at any given moment you could turn on cable TV and you could see the World Tag Championships, pickleball is huge, esports is massive as well, and let's take Ice Cube offering Caitlin Clark $5 million to play in her 3-on-3 league. In your opinion, what does that future look like for sports that are very niche?
Yeah, I think niche sports, it's going to have a platform. The biggest, there's a balance between sports rights and viewership, right? And the more viewership you have in sports, the more rights you can, demand, and the more a company will pay for it. If you have viewership but it's not at scale or it's not deemed incremental, then generally you're not going to get a distribution deal. Or similar to like the UFL and the XFL in the early days, like you're paying to have the distribution. So I think as pickleball grows, and I am a pickleballer, I love it. I've played with Steven here a couple times actually. Like as those audiences grow, you'll start to see that migration and diversity. But again, it comes down to just the general adoption of the population. World Tag, I've watched it a few times, so I'm more really curious. I don't know if that has scale. Like it's fun to watch, it's very interesting. I'm like, damn, that guy can move. But yeah, there are again, other, I don't want to call it fringe, but smaller leagues. And again, or PLL, the Premier Lacrosse League, is I think a prime example. And I have no affiliation to them. I know a couple of people over there. That's it. But they were a startup out of the National Lacrosse League. Paul Rabby, who was a player there, basically was the best player of his generation in college and in this league. And he could barely scrape by. And it's a story you hear about these athletes a lot of times, right? They're playing the sport they love, but they can't pay their rent. And he's like, this is a broken model. And he went out and he started the PLL, and he got like these great investors behind him. And he had to work day and night to get the players that he played with in the National Lacrosse League to come over. And now you have a league that's, I think 8 to 10 teams large. They've moved on from a touring circuit to now they have home bases nationally. They have a distribution deal with ESPN, but that took them 5 years to do. And so there is a path for these smaller leagues, and as the path, as you move along that path, rather, and audiences come along with you, you're going to grow it. And again, it's another opportunity for brands and media to invest and support that. And you're seeing that with women's sports, which is great. Like I have a 7-year-old daughter. Like I want nothing more than the success of women's sports. And so, the rallying cry for all of us is trying to lean in there.
All right. Right here. Or no, we got another one.
Oh, I have a question. Have you given any thought to not just like what leagues you get into, but how maybe you can differentiate the viewing experience? I'm thinking like the Manicast or like some of the stuff like the Barstool does, where it's like almost feels like a community or like you're participating in the event itself. Have you thought anything about that?
Yeah, actually, I know the Barstool guys really well, and do a lot of work with them. And as sports becomes more prevalent in streaming, we call it the fringe content. I think is going to be what we get into. You're seeing it with Max. The Hard Knocks franchise was really just training camp, right? For I think it's now 15 years. Every year we pick a team and we do the training camp, and then they ultimately be cursed, and everyone would blame us. But it's been some of our best content on platform around sports, and so. From training camp, we expanded that to in-season, which I wasn't a big fan for because the first team for in-season was Arizona Cardinals, and that was a really crappy year for us, so I also blamed us. But now, again, we're extending it to a third part of this franchise, which is out of season and following these teams. And so that's one aspect, and yes, it rallies around NFL, which has the biggest viewership, so it makes sense. But again, going back to as other leagues come in, you're going to start to see fringe content that really immerses the consumer into the sports, the talent. Right now, I can't give too much detail. We are looking at sports league sponsorships, and a lot of what is important to us is how do we leverage talent, the athletes, the personnel, to kind of bring our message and our brand. Because what we want to tap into is the authenticity of who those people are. We don't want to just pander to an audience, like just put our logo in our spot there. Like we really want to create tie-in, and because we believe if you tie the brand to an authentic source and you can get that message amplified, the consumer is going to feel that. And typically, I think all of us, when we feel something, we buy something, right? And so that's what we're working towards. We don't have it dialed in yet, but the hope is later this year or the next year we'll have something out.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Will Bradford. I'm with Rebel Moments. My question is, you spoke a bit about customer retention and wanting to move customers from sports programming to content, from content to sports programming, etc. And I was just wondering, have you guys explored any type of rewards programs for consumers that you identify as premier customers that's very engaging with the content and things that you're doing, or even maybe gamifying that type of programming or offering to certain customers?
Well, you speak my love language. So yes and no. I can tell you who does it really well is Sony and Crunchyroll. What you're talking about is the flywheel in terms of rewarding consumers to explore your ecosystem. Amazon's kind of like it, but not so much. And so where that starts is I'll revert back to audience segmentation. We have a big initiative right now where as the merge companies came together, we obviously have all these branded assets and we have consumers that do different things in different parts. Right? We have the theatrical division where they're paying the theater owner to go watch the film. We have our home ed entertainment team that obviously selling DVDs and the rentals before a title will come to Max. We have our games division. We have our DC comic book division, believe it or not. We still print comic books. And we never really had a data spine of understanding who those consumers were, what's the overlap between divisions. And so a lot of work that went on post-merger is to really create what we call as the Warner Brothers Discovery WBD data spine. And that allows us to understand, a consumer and how they're moving across our organization and, completely eradicate duplication so that we have a consumer file, going back to, I forget who mentioned it, just like a one PD source that we can now leverage in media. So that was the first step. The gamification and the rewarding, I think that's coming. We have to explore that. But there was a lot of work, I'd say, over 18 months, almost the day after the merger happened and our teams came together, that we started on that, and hopefully some of the next steps are going to be more into what we're talking about.
Well, it's a complicated space, and we appreciate your knowledge.
Awesome, everyone give a round of
Yeah,
applause.
thank you.